we are begging the worst people on the planet, the Taliban, to at least give us the optical grace of not burning down our embassy. That's going to work, guys. Way to man up there. If you could just not burn our embassy so there aren't these ugly pictures on CNN that get people mad at us, that would be amazing. Pathetic. This is all, it's amazing to watch this administration spin as though they're just not abandoning these folks. And again, you want to abandon them, make the case. Make the case why they should be abandoned. Make the case why the sacrifice that we are currently undergoing, not the sacrifice we underwent for the last 20 years, the sacrifice we are currently undergoing is unnecessary. I haven't heard virtually anybody make that case. I keep hearing phrases like endless wars thrown around without recognition of the fact that we had 3,500 troops on the ground and 0 combat deaths in the last 18 months. Like, I keep hearing phraseology thrown around about, look how much money we've already spent, which is sort of like saying that you buy a house, and let's say the house is a money pit, like it's a complete money pit, and you spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to upgrade this house, and it's eaten up your savings. So after you're done, right, and now you're living in the house, it's got some maintenance issues, but you're living there and you've already spent a lot of money. So you decide, you know what? Because I spent a lot of money here over the last 10 years, I'm out now, and you just abandon the house. That makes no sense. Why would you do that? Again, the question is not what we've spent in the past or whether that's justified. There are serious questions about that. The question is, why are we leaving now? And the answer is because Joe Biden is a boob, a rube, and a moron. That is the answer. There's no other answer that is possible. You know that he's gone completely wrong when even the Washington Post editorial board is like, guys, this dude is screwing things up in a radical way. The Washington Post, their editorial board, they put up a piece titled, Afghan lives ruined or lost will be part of Biden's legacy. Yeah, no bleep. According to the Washington Post editorial board, Mr. Biden called it quits, he says, because after 20 years of trying to get Kabul to govern effectively and fight harder against the Taliban, there was still no outright victory or prospect of one. But the United States was stalemated, not defeated. There's a difference, and how big a difference may soon become tragically apparent. In addition to preventing terrorists from using Afghanistan as a base for another 9/11, the United States achieved, or at least oversaw, real progress for the people of Afghanistan. When the Taliban ruled between 1996 and 2001, it forbade schooling for girls. By 2015, the last year for which World Bank data exists, more than 50% of girls attended first grade. In 2006, the co-ed American University of Afghanistan, which now enrolls over 1,700 students, opened in Kabul, supported by U.S. government funds. It has partnerships with Stanford, the UCs, University of California, and the University of Nebraska. A massive terrorist attack in 2016 forced the AUAF to close. It courageously reopened in 2017. Most Afghans live in unfathomable poverty, but today's per capita income of around $550 per year is still a 66% improvement in real terms since 2002. Biden surveys the impending disaster and absolves himself of any responsibility. He says it's up to Afghan leaders to come together. He said they've got to fight for themselves. The truth is they had been fighting, but the United States had trained them to do it with the support of U.S. advisors and contractors. Suddenly, all the support is just gone. The Biden administration says it will take care of people who work directly for the United States. In a real sense, though, this country assumed at least a partial responsibility for the Afghan people, and now we are abandoning them. Of course, that is very largely true. And, the video coming out from Afghanistan is not pretty. The BBC has a report about what life is like under restored Taliban rule. Suffice it to say, it doesn't look like people living in Brooklyn.
The market is still busy. Women have apparently been allowed to come here without male companions if they need to. But elsewhere, Taliban commanders have reportedly banned them.
Since if they don't wear the burqa, there is no problem. They can wear the hijab. There's no compulsion to wear the burqa if the head is covered by a hijab. Oh, well then.
The next day, a young woman was killed close by, allegedly for wearing immodest clothing. Many fear the Taliban want to resurrect their practice of brutal punishments. They insist they were not responsible for this flogging, supposedly filmed last year.
Many people here in Afghanistan and around the world would be horrified at the idea of a society where hands are cut, women are stoned to death.
He says, we're being misjudged. Is it better to let these crimes go unpunished? You mean the crime of walking around without your head covered in a bag? Like that crime right there? Yeah, things are going beautifully over there. By the way, how pathetic is America right now? Here's how pathetic America is. This story is unreal. Okay, this is from the New York Times. U.S. asks Taliban to spare its embassy in coming fight for Kabul. We are begging the worst people on the planet, the Taliban, to at least give us the optical grace of not burning down our embassy. It's okay if you take over the country and you kill all of the people who worked with us and you acid all the women who go to school and you beat people in the street and sometimes shoot them in the street. That's all okay. Please, if you could just not burn our embassy so there aren't these ugly pictures on CNN that get people mad at us, that would be amazing. Pathetic, with a capital P. According to the New York Times, American negotiators are trying to extract assurances from the Taliban that they will not attack the U.S. embassy in Kabul if the extremist group takes over the country's government and ever wants to receive foreign aid, 3 American officials said. Foreign aid? The F you talk to the Taliban? To you, what? Don't burn our capital if you ever want us to sign you a check. Under what circumstances would we be signing checks to the Taliban? The people who literally are murdering all of the people we allied ourselves with. This is legitimately one of the most pathetic things I've ever heard in terms of American foreign policy. We are now begging the Taliban, a ragtag group of 8th century primitives, we are begging them to not burn our capital, to not burn our embassy, because if they burn our embassy, maybe we won't sign them a welfare check. According to the New York Times, the effort led by Zalmay Khalilzad, the chief American envoy in talks with the Taliban, seeks to stave off a full evacuation of the embassy as they rapidly seize cities across Afghanistan. On Thursday, the State Department announced it was sending home an unspecified number of the 1,400 Americans stationed at the embassy and drawing down what the agency's spokesperson, Ned Price, described as a core diplomatic presence in Kabul. By the way, the Pentagon spokesperson announcing this thing, this is just, it's pathetic. It's pathetic footage. And I will say that America's response to all of this, to the insanity of what's going on, is even more pathetic. The U.S. Embassy put out a statement about the detention by the Taliban of members of the Afghan government. Here is the statement put out by the Embassy of the United States of America, the most powerful country in the history of the world, again, to a bunch of ragtag cavemen from the 8th century. Quote, the U.S. Embassy in Afghanistan condemns detention of Afghan officials. We strongly condemn the unlawful arrest of several members of the Afghan government, including both civilian leaders and officers of the Afghan National Defense and Security Forces. Credible sources indicate that the Taliban have detained provincial government officials and members of the Afghan police in several locations. These actions are unacceptable, and they contradict the Taliban's claim to support a negotiated settlement in the ongoing Doha peace process. The actions also contrast the Taliban's own rhetoric, providing for the safety of Afghan leaders and troops in areas recently seized by the Taliban. We're urging the immediate release of all Afghan government officials detained by the Taliban, and we are calling on the Taliban to fully and earnestly engage in negotiations that end the suffering of the Afghan people and pave the way for an inclusive political settlement that benefits all Afghans. That's going to work, guys. Way to man up there. That's totally going to work. You mean a weakly and vaguely worded you're urging the Taliban to not execute the people they oppose? Well, then, that radically changed. Until then, the Taliban were just like, we're going to do whatever the hell we want and execute all of our enemies. But now that you put out a statement urging them not to do so for the sake of miscongeniality-esque world peace, that's going to change the math on the ground. Nobody ever asked them to be nice before. Now that somebody's asked them to be nice, I think that'll change everything. Again, there are no words for how pathetic this is. And remember, the people who are currently dancing in the offices of the governor of Kashmir not only lack rhythm, they lack a basic sense of civilization and human decency. These are the worst people on earth. There's some video that emerged from Afghanistan of Taliban fighters dancing around. Honestly, they have even worse rhythm than I do, which is saying an awful lot. Here's some of that footage. Yeah, that's not good dancing. I will say. Apparently good at humiliating the Biden State Department, very bad at dancing. Also, that music is not. Okay, that's enough of that. Okay. Meanwhile, by the way, the vacuum is being filled. Remember, Afghanistan is not the only country on the planet, and the Taliban aren't the only group we have to worry about. China is now preparing to recognize the Taliban because China is completely transactional. China is entirely transactional. Understand that us abandoning Afghanistan does not mean that some group we'll never hear of again is going to take over. It means that the Chinese government will cut a deal with the Taliban to extract natural resources. The Chinese government will strengthen itself. If you think of China as a serious long-term threat to the viability of the American project, which you should because they're incredibly aggressive, then it should trouble you that China has now extended its tentacles ever more westward. According to U.S. News, China is now preparing to recognize the Taliban as the legitimate ruler of Afghanistan if it succeeds in toppling the Western-backed government in Kabul. The U.S. News has learned, a prospect that undercuts the Biden administration's remaining source of leverage over the insurgent network as it continues its startling campaign to regain control. Beijing has publicly pressured the Taliban to continue working toward a peace agreement, an outcome China appears to genuinely prefer and one the U.S. has pressed with growing urgency, but New Chinese military and intelligence assessments of the realities on the ground have prompted leaders in the Chinese Communist Party to prepare to formalize their relationship with the insurgent network, according to multiple U.S. and foreign intelligence sources familiar with the Chinese assessments. So while the Biden administration's like, guys, please don't burn our embassy because we might not send you foreign aid, China's like, if you burn their embassy, you're still going to get foreign aid, guys. We're going to be your friends. Okay, China does not care with whom they make a deal. They don't care about the human rights of the people with whom they make a deal because they're a human rights violator themselves. They are a tyrannical overlordship, and they are a real threat to American interests globally. Isolationism is not a solution to your opponents wanting to expand their power. If the Taliban want to claim international legitimacy, these actions will not get them the legitimacy they seek, said White House spokeswoman Jen Psaki. They should devote the same energy to the peace process as they do to the military campaign, or alternatively, they could ignore you and then just make a deal with the Chinese. So all of this is going extremely well. This is a massive failure on the part of the Biden administration, and they need to own it. They need to own it in the same way that Barack Obama had to own the rise of ISIS. This is way worse. This is way worse. At least you can make an argument with regard to ISIS that ISIS was a small ragtag band when we pulled out of Iraq. This is significantly worse. We all know what's happening in real time. This is not like we leave and then ISIS gradually rises and suddenly 6 months later we're worried about it. We're watching the bad guys take over Kabul now. And Biden is like, well, Matlock's on. The battle for the culture is heating up. We here at the Daily Wire are making some big moves. So be sure to like, subscribe, ring that bell, because you're not going to want to miss a single moment.